Namo Buddhaya Chakunjuma Tabu Tushebe Mata Jume Lede Dabaye Kunye Jume Doa Denzebe Denze Gume Kula Kyapsuji Yume Leje Gumbo Kikini.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel discussion, Empowering Himalayan Nuns. I'm Ciupak, Associate Professor of Sociology at Northern Michigan University. My Dharma name is Karma Dawa. I'm your humble host and the organizer of today's program. More than 2,500 years ago, Gautama Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, pointing out a path towards liberation from human suffering. Furthermore, he taught that all sentient beings are equal. He and his disciples walked alongside the poorest, the untouchable, and the most despised. This concept was quite revolutionary in the 5th century BC in India. As you can see, starting from the very birth of Buddhism, equality and compassion have always been central to its principles and practice. On the other hand, just like any other social institutions, religions cannot escape the time and space constraints, gender disparity being one of the examples. Thankfully, from Ananda requesting the Buddha to grant women ordination and join the Sangha to today's non-empowerment movement, generation after generation, there have been relentless efforts to make gender equality a social reality. Countless men and women, both monastics and lay people, have dedicated their lives to nuns' empowerment through advocacy, education, philanthropy, and other efforts. The past few decades, particularly, have witnessed quite some progress in many areas. Today, we are honored to have some trailblazers and leaders at the forefront of this social movement to share their experiences and insights with us. First and foremost, we have the most venerable Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo joining us from the Holy Land of India. She is the founder of the Dongyi Gasolin Nunnery in India. She is also the founding member of the Committee for Bhikkhuni Ordination. She also serves as the honorary advisor to the International Network of Engaged Buddhists and co-president of the International Buddhist Confederation. Connecting from Hawaii is Venerable Karma Lekshe Tsomo. She is professor of theology and religious studies at the University of San Diego. She co-founded Sakyahita International Association of Buddhist Women in 1987. She's also the founding director of the Jamyang Foundation. Welcome. Joining us from Bhutan is Dr. Tashi Zangmo. In 2009, she established the Bhutan Nuns Foundation, which works with about 30 Buddhist nunneries, educating and training nuns to be community leaders and teachers. BBC named Dr. Tashi Zangmo among 100 most influential women of 2018. Last but not least, Venerable Lama Kama Drodul, joining us from the upper state of New York. Lama Kama Drodul studied at Changgu Monastery as a youth and completed 2 of the traditional 3-year, 3-month retreats in Kameling Retreat Center. Lama Kama is the president of the KTD, North American seat of His Holiness, the 17th Karmapa. Lama Kama is a co-founder and board member of the nonprofit organization Help Tibetan Nuns, which celebrates its 10th anniversary this year. It would take days to give a proper introduction and tell the legend stories of our distinguished panelists. Therefore, I strongly encourage our audience to read the complete bios of our distinguished panelists and check out their websites. With that being said, now let's turn to our panelists.
I came to India in 1964, having become a Buddhist when I was 18. And I met my Lama, Chagong Khampa Rinpoche, that same year. And then I became a nun and stayed with his community for some years. Then from there, I moved to the Himalayan region of Lahul Spiti in Himachal Pradesh. So I stayed there for about 18 years. And while there, I could see very clearly that the nuns were treated basically, well, mostly they were overlooked and neglected, but when they were not, they were mostly household servants, or they were the servants for the Lama's family. They had no education. They were not given the more profound teachings. Certain Lamas were going to those regions and teaching, for example, the 6 yogas of Naropa and putting monks into 3-year retreat. But there was no way that they were going to put nuns into retreat or give them any of these more profound teachings. But anyway, this is life. And then in the 90s, in the 1990s, the Lamas of my community in India, in Kampaga Monastery, said, look, we have nothing for the women. Why don't you help women? You should start a nunnery. And I remembered that the previous Kamta Rinpoche had said, I want you to start a nunnery. So I thought, this is what I need to do. But how to start a nunnery? I had no idea. I mean, I had no money. I had no resources. I didn't even know how nunneries are run. To be honest, the monastery, the Kampaga monastery at Tashi were exemplary. They spent so much time and energy training the girls who came and teaching them Tibetan, teaching them chanting, teaching them all the what is needed for running a nunnery and performing rituals, and study the kempos there, taught the nuns, and everybody took them very seriously. So we were very fortunate. Also, one Lama, Dozon Rinpoche, he said to me, you're very fortunate, because all our monasteries, when we start a monastery, we're always looking backwards to how it was in Tibet and trying to recover how we did it in Tibet. The closest it is to that and how we did it in the past, the better it is. So we never can go forward. But you don't have anything in your past. So you can do anything you want. You're free. Just think how you want the nunnery to be run, what you want it to do. Look around at other monasteries and nunneries, see what is good, what is not so good. Then you create your own nunnery. So this is what we've done. The nuns here, they have a 12-year study program where they debate. So this is a whole new thing, not just for our nunnery, but for nunneries everywhere, that the idea that nuns actually are intelligent and can be trained and can study and can do all the things the monks can do and more. This is a huge step forward in the last 30 years of how people view a nun, that they're not just, nice, good, pious girls praying to come back in a male form next time, but they themselves in this very lifetime can accomplish anything. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Karmapa and many others have said, this is your time now. You can do anything you want. Young girls are coming to be trained because they see that this is a meaningful life option for them to dedicate their lives to the genuine study and practice of the Dharma. And they love it. They're so happy. Finally, they're being fulfilled. So this is a wonderful thing.
Also in the nunneries, many of the nuns get education and training, and they themselves become teachers. So education and training apparently is one really relevant theme in the whole movement. You also mentioned Dr. Tashi Zangmo, and would you like to go next, Tashi-la?
I hear what Jetsunma says and means, because when I first thought of working for the nuns, starting this foundation, Bhutan Nuns Foundation in Bhutan, in 2006, Jetsunma is talking even before that. But in 2006, when I went around, I was doing my PhD in US, in Massachusetts, University of Massachusetts. And that's when I wrote my doctoral thesis on nuns education, because I thought this is something that is not covered and nobody talks about it. And then I might as well, if I write something, I might as well do something that will benefit in the future, and that speaks to the, be the voice of the nuns in Bhutan. So in 2006, I went around the country and did some research and met with the nuns. That time there was only about 21 nunneries in the country. Now, today at this time, there is almost 30 nunneries. And so it's growing. Like Jetsunma mentioned, it's growing, it's vibrant, it's becoming. And even more so after we have started the foundation and start talking about them. Now everyone wants to share a piece of pie, and it has become a cool thing in Bhutan. So I'm really grateful and happy, because when we just started the foundation under the patronage of the Queen Mother, it was very it was something new, and it was difficult. Your question is how we thought of doing this and what inspired us. And I was inspired from the very beginning, because my family is from a very spiritual, religious family, and I was brought up in a family that believed and followed Buddha Dharma very diligently. And my older sister was a nun, and I always had a soft corner for nuns, and I always noticed them that there should be more, that there is a lot of potential that nuns have and they could do in the society. So that's what I saw, and I wrote my thesis on nuns education. They, like Jetsunma mentioned, what they need is education and someone to support and empower them and recognize their potential. So that was not there. Nobody recognized their potential. And so we started the foundation, and that's how we started. And then we discussed, I was inspired by Her Majesty, and then under Her Majesty's patronage, we decided to start this foundation. And that has been something, best thing I would say that I have done in my life. And I feel so fortunate to be serving for the nuns. Whatever little I can do, I can't claim that I'm changing their life, world, or whatever. And how dare I can do that, but at least to make a difference and voice for them and make them see what they're capable of, and to help them recognize their potential. That's all we are doing right now.
Okay, thank you. I became a Buddhist when I was quite young. I was about 11, and I was really inspired to go to India and study more, Japan and all of this. But in India, I found lots of opportunities to study Buddhism. But when I looked around, I noticed that many of the nuns were illiterate, especially the ones who were coming from Tibet. And so I gathered them up in 1986 and started a literacy program, found a Lama who would teach them to read. And within 2 months, all of them had learned to read, even the one who was 63 years old. At that time, the situation of Tibetan nuns was really very sad. Really, whereas the monks would automatically be taken care of and sent to monasteries wherever they liked to go, there was really nothing for nuns. There were 2 nunneries, but they were full. And so what motivated me was seeing the sad situation of the nuns, and I felt that I had to try to do something. At that time, there were many misconceptions and misogynistic attitudes about women in general, and especially nuns. Oh, the jokes. It was really sad. Women are too stupid. Women aren't interested in studying. All they can possibly do is recite Om Mani Padme Hum. And nuns are losers who can't get a husband and so forth. So in fact, the nuns proved them very wrong. One by one, we had a full-time study program in Dharamsala, Jamyang Shiling. And from this first class came 6 of the first 20 geshes among the women. So this is quite historical, that women should become teachers of philosophy, recognized for their achievements. Over the years, more and more women showed interest, and in the end, we've started 15 study programs throughout the Himalayas. All of them are non-sectarian. The nuns can follow any teachings they feel affinity with. Especially in the Himalayan region of India, Buddhism is challenged because of the living conditions. But we have programs, the first one in Dharamsala and then one in Kinnoor, started 3 in Spiti, there are 9 in Zanskar, and 1 in Bodh Gaya, which is for the nuns to study in the winter when it's so freezing cold up in the Himalayas. So 3 of these 15 are now self-sufficient, which is our goal, that nuns should be in charge of their own projects and should take leadership roles in their own monasteries. These monasteries are generally speaking in the poorest areas of India. And so the ones that we support now, we continue to support because they do not have other sources of support, sadly. From 1987 then, we gathered women together to try to talk about the situation, because it wasn't just in the Tibetan tradition that nuns were having difficulties. It seemed to be a universal phenomenon. So we started the Sakadita conference in Bodh Gaya that His Holiness inaugurated. And since then, we have held conferences every 2 years. So I always take the nuns to the conferences from the very beginning to expose them to different schools of Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist culture, different languages, and also to inspire them by the accomplishments of women and especially the nuns in other countries. And that has, I think, been very important for their development. From the very first conference, we all recognized that education was key. And so, although there have been many challenges, things are getting better and better. So that's just a beginning.
My contribution is really just, very, very small for the nuns. I was, when I was a monk, I'm from Tonggu Monastery in Eastern Tibet. And, we used to travel, perform pujas in villages. And I was about 16 years old. These families have, nuns, and they all wear this not really monastic traditional robes, but just red chuva, we call. And then just work like Jetsunma expressed earlier. Just work like a lay person, because there's no place to go, nobody seem like really care much. So I didn't know much about all this stuff, but I felt there was a sense of sadness, sense of some kind of almost like sick to stomach. I feel like, oh, okay, I'm fortunate that I'm in a, like in monastery and doing all these pujas, and these, ladies, they don't get to learn anything. And so, although at that time, I didn't have any ability, but I had a sense of aspiration that I hope, one day maybe there's, something I could do it, because we didn't have any nunnery. And then a few years later, I came to US 1997, and then the abbot of the monastery, my cousin Lodunyo Rinpoche. So we together built a nunnery, at Tonggu Monastery. It's actually a very nice place. It's a very famous, this Samsing Gambu's queen, the Chinese queen place, very special place. And then, mainly my cousin's effort, we built a nunnery. And so after we built nunnery, and then we, my ability is very limited, but we just buy buses or just sponsoring pujas, whatever we could do. So now we have 3-year retreat, the 6 Dhammas from Naropa, and then the Berotsana retreat, and then also like daily education at the monastery, the nunnery, I mean. And so recently finished the Golden Roof. Felt very good, Kamadawa was part of that as well. And so we have this little nuns organization, helping Tibetan nuns. And, we basically help the nunnery at Tonggu Monastery in Eastern Tibet, and then also Sikkim, there's a nunnery of His Eminence Gyatso Rinpoche's little nunnery there, and then Telopur nunnery. So our effort, our contribution is actually very small, but we never really, we just celebrated 10 years contribution or celebration. I don't know if I'm qualified to speak in this group, but I feel there's a sense of equality, when you do something for them. And my mother passed away a few years ago, and one of the her kind of last words were like, please make sure that my when it happens, when I die, that this prayer be requested at nunnery. So she also has a lot of sense of that connection with nuns.
Thank you, Lamala. You and many others always are so modest, so modest. Everyone have been doing so much, but I always feel like you're not doing enough. That's my impression. From what I hear, there are such a wide range of work that everyone engage, from some basic construction to education and training, which is seem to be consistent, really essential piece here. And then from improving the nuns' living conditions to I know some of you are working on the full ordination. So many different kind of aspects, and I really rejoice in the work.
Before I forget, I must mention this. These 2 venerables, they are also my inspiration actually to do all this work when they are like Western women trying so hard to improve the situation of our Himalayan regions, women's education and Buddha Dharma practice. I mean, what are we doing? We must do even more. So that's how I get always inspiration from our 2 venerables out there. Nobody believed much in my work. And thank God that we had the Queen Mother. So that was something that, that was inspiring. Otherwise, me alone wouldn't have been able to achieve what we have achieved so far. The challenges are, I always say that our beneficiaries must understand. First and foremost, our beneficiaries, the nuns, must understand that we are doing something, what we are doing is for them, and that it benefits them. If you don't win their heart like that, then it's no use. Because, and to win that, again, they are used to following the order and rules above them, and that is the monk teachers and the lamas and rinpoches have been always instructing them what to do, and they had been following what they have been told to do. So that's why they don't see themselves they don't see themselves as a potential, or they can do things and they can lead. They are followers rather than leaders. So that had been the most challenge I found working with the nuns, because you have to win the heart of their heads, the lamas or khenpos. Otherwise, you can never get access to them. That kind of thing had been the most challenging thing that I have seen working for the nuns. So now, like I said, we have came a long way. It's been almost like more than a decade, almost 12 years now working for this foundation. So it's now we are trying to educate them, like give trainings. Basically, our foundation is meant for, because we giving Buddhist training is the job, it is the responsibility of their teachers and lamas and the founders of the nunneries. But otherwise, for us to fill up the gap, we give trainings like leadership and management, life skills trainings, how to be a teacher, counseling, because in the current society with the youth and all this in the society, all these problems with the modernization, the problems come in equally. When the country develops, moving forward towards the development, the problems are coming, it's like a competition. So the nuns can do a lot for that. So that's why we are trying to give them, trainings on how counseling and teacher. So of course the challenges are always there, but not to give up is our responsibility.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That was great. And from what I hear, some of the biggest challenges, especially as you started, was about the nuns' confidence, and you did a lot of this work and education and training to help them to see themselves and all the potentials in themselves. And when I hear that, what echoed in my mind was one of the videos, and I saw some time ago. I believe Jetsunma also talked about that in one of the talks about the nuns' confidence, and you saw how the nuns' confidence has been improving all these years.
Yes, indeed. When one asked in the early days in all the nunneries, what's the main obstacle? They would say lack of confidence. Because if you're in a society where you're overlooked and neglected, where you are not educated, where you have no voice, where the male counterpart is so strong and so confident, then your whole sense of who you are is undermined. And so, as we all know, the key was education. And this is why all of us have put a lot of emphasis on this. I mean, Lekshe Tsomo has started and maintained so many nunneries throughout the various Himalayan regions because of knowing that this was what the nuns needed, was that key was that they should be able to read, to write, to comprehend, and to be able to think for themselves, to be able to debate, to understand the philosophy, to understand the very religion which they were supposed to be upholding, to get that inner sense that, yes, I can do this. It's not just the monks. We also can study and practice and understand and carry on the lineage, not just the males. And so this was an enormous step forward. I mean, in the last 30 years, this has been the really, really important thing. Education and practice and the understanding that Buddha nature is not male or female, and that we all have the potential within us. We all have the wisdom. We all have the compassion. It just needs to be nurtured. The seeds are all there. If we get enough sunshine and water and some fertilizer around there, it will grow, it will flourish. And it has so quickly. They themselves have become the teachers. They themselves run the nunnery. They have their own committees and they make their own decisions. And this, I think, is where, and the outreach, now so many people coming to the nunnery because so many of the lay women, you know, who do you go to when you have problems with your family? Well, you can't go to the monks because they don't understand, but you can come to the nuns. So as was mentioned about teaching nuns counseling and empowerment sessions and things like this, to get the nuns to really believe in their own potential and to have a voice. This is happening now. And, you know, if you think of it, you know, 20, 30 years, it's a finger snap. And yet the whole view of what a nun is capable of and what they are there for has undergone a revolution. So I think that this is a wonderful thing. You know, the obstacles have just fallen apart. And part of this is, it's definitely because of the enormous encouragement and teaching which they have received from the monks and the lamas. When the lamas come now, for example, when the Karmapa came to our nunnery, he said, look, I'm sorry, in the past, you were always overlooked, you were neglected, nobody took care of you. This is our shame, that in all these centuries, we have done nothing for you. And so therefore you were praying to come back in a male body, to have the opportunities to ripen your potential. But the Karmapa said, this is not true anymore. You have beautiful nunneries, you have devoted teachers, you have all the opportunities for study, for practice. There is nothing which you cannot attain in a female body in this very lifetime. So, you know, times have changed.
Well, if we were to talk about the obstacles, I think I could write a book, but that's a book I will never write because we want to look at the accomplishments, the achievements that have been made and look on the bright side. In the early days, though, there were many, many obstacles. And talk about, you know, social factors. It was a matter of changing something that had been in place for 2,500 years. So of course, making changes was not welcome to everyone. And the fact that I am a Westerner and some of the biggest troublemakers were Western women, yes, we did hear some rumblings, of course. But I think over the years, everyone has come to appreciate that it was an important transformation. And of course, it's only begun. But in those days, you know, the lack of sufficient food and housing and healthcare and education was glaring. Still, I would get notes slipped to me that said, are you trying to compete with the monks and things like that? But I think I just had to set aside the criticisms because I believe strongly in what we were doing. Another big obstacle was finding teachers. In the early days, you know, people were very reluctant, monks were reluctant to go to a nunnery because of the, you know, gossip in a small community. What are the monks doing in the nunnery? And also the leadership. I think several of you have spoken to the importance of supporting, nurturing leadership. So I'd like to show you some visuals because I think that that will give you an idea of what we're talking about. So here's just one project among many, but to give you an idea, when we talk about the Himalayas, of course, they're vast. Most of our projects have been in the Western Himalayas, Zanskar, Spiti, Kinur, and Bodh Gaya, just to give you an idea of the geography. And you can see that the terrain is really challenging. I mean, it's 8 months of snow and the roads are blocked. And I mean, you can't imagine the physical hardships that the nuns endure and the people in these regions. It's unimaginable, even in the summer. So the people are very, very interesting. They've kept their culture for thousands of years, and they've been Buddhist since the 8th century. Buddhism never died out in India. It's been going strong here from at least the 8th century, probably before. But the nuns didn't really have a place. They were considered the aunties of the family. They weren't forced to marry, which is very important to note. But they didn't really have a monastery to go to. So they were just called Annie because they're the aunties of the children in the family. So it was really quite revolutionary when they started studying philosophy. And we found a monk who'd been in a cave, a Tibetan monk, and he started to teach. He had enough confidence in the nuns that they could learn. And so we began, but they were so malnourished. It wasn't easy in the beginning. They're very conscientious to try to maintain their cultural traditions and to support the younger generation. So this is important too, the generation gap. And in some monasteries, it was a problem. Fortunately, in our projects, the older generation has, for the most part, supported the younger generation. And this is really, I think, important for all of us to note, that we do stand on the shoulders of each other. This was one of our first monasteries in Spiti. And you can see the little ones who are now the leaders of the monasteries. And subjects like learning English, that was revolutionary. In the tradition, they felt that learning English was frivolous, and that if you learned English, you would get married. So I did point out to one abbot that there were plenty of monks who dropped out who didn't know a word of English, but in general, it was considered that English was a worldly subject. Now, of course, everyone recognizes how important it is to have access to international languages. We suffered a great deal from a lack of resources. I mean, we didn't have tables. We really had to struggle a lot. I'm not good in fundraising, and but the nuns were so determined that they just stuck through it all. And we've had almost no dropouts. You know, the retention rate among the nuns is very high. And this is something that we need to recognize too. That's maybe why His Holiness Dalai Lama has said that the future of Himalayan Buddhism is in the hands of the nuns. That, by the way, was one of the Sakadita conferences that the nuns have been attending, which has had a major impact on their levels of confidence and competence. So now things that we don't recognize, the nuns having access to the rituals and to the ritual instruments and to, mandalas and learning cham and even basic literacy, the texts and so forth. This is our institute in Bodh Gaya, the first monastery for women in Bodh Gaya in, as far as we know, 2,500 years. So it's very simple, but it's very significant that finally women have a place to stay in Bodh Gaya. So they come down 70 or 80 at a time and study, have intramural debates. And last slide, I wanted to note, I just got this yesterday, the nuns up at one of our monasteries in Zanskar got an award for their work in preserving culture and environment. And then they were invited to present at the Independence Day celebration in Ladakh. It's the first time in history that nuns have ever been included. So these things may be small steps, but very, very important. Thank you.
I mean, personally, it has been very interesting that although for basically millennia, nuns were never taken seriously as far as education was concerned, and they really mostly were left in literary ignorance. But once the subject, the idea that nuns could be educated on a par with the monks was raised, it was very interesting how very quickly all the barriers fell down and the monks stepped forward to train them. I mean, certainly in my own experience, the monks in the Kampagan monastery of Tashi have been exemplary in sending their very, very best kempos and their most skilled monks to teach the nuns everything they needed to learn in ritual, in instruments, traumas, and in philosophy and debating. And they were so keen and they loved it. And they're so proud of their nuns, how accomplished they've all become now. You can see them just glowing, you know, these are our girls, look at them. They just love it. And they never saw that as being a rivalry. But when it comes to the question of full ordination, bhikshuni ordination for nuns, then we hit this wall of resistance in all the traditions, basically. And even though the Karmapa for a time was being very supportive and trying to bring about this ordination with the cooperation of nuns in Taiwan. But then when he left India and went abroad, somehow that all fell apart. Then I don't know why, but somehow the other monks, lamas, rinpoches who were left behind were not so motivated, or whatever was the politics behind it. Anyway, nothing much has been done since his Karmapa has left India. And so we are looking to other places, to maybe, you know, other regions to help with this, to come forward. It's so interesting how there's been so much resistance. Why do the monks not rejoice that the fourfold Sangha can be reestablished as the Buddha intended? Because right from the beginning, the Buddha said, I cannot go into nirvana until the fourfold Sangha is established, the fourfold Sangha of monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen. This, he said, it's like a table which is stable with 4 legs. And this is what I need to do in this lifetime. And so when that fourfold Sangha was well established, then he said, okay, now I can leave because the Dharma will continue to flourish. And why those countries which do not have bhikshuni ordination are so resistant is very interesting, especially now in the Tibetan tradition, where the nuns are so totally capable of observing the Vinaya, upholding the Vinaya, doing all the rituals in accordance with their higher monastic ordination and so forth. I mean, now they're highly educated. Before, okay, they were not educated. They would not have been able to become really, really uphold the bhikshuni lineage. But now there's no excuse at all. Now there's no excuse. Their ethics is perfect. We don't hear scandals about nuns. And they are very well regulated, living in harmony, studying, practicing, and leading exemplary Dharma lives. So where is the objection?
There is some kind of a natural resistance to change. And this is where the empowerment of nuns comes in. This is where the training and leadership comes in. And lest we forget, in fact, the impetus for full ordination of nuns in the Tibetan tradition needs to come from the nuns themselves, right? And until they feel that they want to be fully ordained, then I think that there is no, we cannot impose that on them. We don't want to impose that on them. But we have to recognize that they're being told by the monks, who are the, you know, ultimate power brokers, are telling them that it's not necessary. They're saying, can you really keep 10 precepts purely? Meaning, don't you eat after noon? And so the nuns, then they feel inadequate to take on more precepts. This is because I know privately, many of them want to be fully ordained, but they don't want to be the first ones. So they're waiting for His Holiness the Dalai Lama to ordain them. They want to be ordained with him. And so they're waiting and waiting and waiting. and we're still waiting. But in Bhutan, you already have fully ordained nuns. At Telugu, they already have fully ordained nuns. So it can happen where nuns are courageous enough to take the first step. That's very important. Again, leadership. Oh, by the way, I'm also on that committee, the full ordination of nuns in the Tibetan tradition. So we've been working on this for the last, 10, 15 years to try to, and we've done a lot of research to prove why these lineages from other countries, the Bhikshuni lineages are valid, and how the ordination can be held. We've published this material, you can find it online. So people can learn more from that.
I don't know in details, but as far as what I heard was that there was exist. And for example, like some of our nuns from KTG are fully ordained because they received some ordination in Taiwan or somewhere. And His Holiness Karmapa always, looking into possibilities, how to help all those nuns. And so I think, in Tibetan Buddhism, within Tibetan Buddhism, the tradition of the fully Bhikshuni vow can be restored.
Now the world is a mess. We need moral leadership more than ever before in the world, in human history. And here we have an opportunity to optimize all of these thousands of sincere, dedicated practitioners. We should do that.
The next question, could you please use one sentence to describe Buddhist women's status or situation today? So if you can use one sentence or one word, what would you say?
Encouraging.
It's improving.
Yes.
It's improving.
So is that
educated and cool and ready.
Wonderful. And Jetsunma, what did you say?
I said it's improving.
Great, thank you. Anything else to add?
Journey, but they're on their way.
It's in transition, not there yet, but it's transition.
Then looking forward, what do you think are the most urgent or important work to be done?
My hope is that many of them, or at least some of them, will go back to their own regions, because most of the nunneries are filled with girls from the border regions like Ladakh and Zanskar, Kinnoor, Lahore, Spiti, Arunachal, who come down, except for Lekshe has wonderfully started nunneries in their own regions, because a lot of the monasteries, not just nunneries, are now not filled with Tibetans in the diaspora, but they are filled with these young people, the men and women in the monasteries and nunneries coming from the border regions. So Ladakh and Kinnoor, Lahore, and so forth. They get their education, they get their training, but I sincerely hope they go back. Not all of them, but a significant number, to revive the Dharma in their own countries, in their own regions. So this is what we need for these people, the people to talk to them in their own language, in their own idiom and culture, to help them to recognize the glory of the Buddha Dharma.
Never give up. Only you know your dream. Nobody else knows. So that's why not to give up and keep up, focus on your dream has been important for me. So that's what I would share with everybody out there, is that whatever, if you're supporting the nuns, please don't give up on that. If you are a nun, please don't give up. So nobody knows other than yourselves what your goal is. So focus on your own goal. That's what I have.
this would be my advice, that people do please help support the projects that are going, the ones that have been successful, the ones that are staffed by women. I know, there are a lot of projects out there, but to support women's efforts, I think is very, very important. And I'm sure a lot of people have been helping, and we appreciate it all. Thank you for those of you who have helped.
I will say one word, then I will, one word is that, like Jetsunma mentioned about his son's Kamapa, how also you have expressed that how nuns changed over the few years. And I truly see myself that, there's a few years when his son emphasized on nuns, leading Kaju Melam or the Tsuma, the winter, and the nuns, every year they are so inspiring. Their voice is so beautiful and so wonderful. And his son has come up once expressed that this has to be, kind of a middle, which means that society has to give the opportunity, but also nuns has to step up. So education is the key.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And when I was hearing this, I just feel like so much inspiration here, and also hear the different obstacles, but we also see their courage to overcome all these obstacles. And I'm thinking of the Buddhism. The Buddhism see the world in two realities. On the ultimate reality, there's no self, no other, and let alone there's a gender difference, like some of you mentioned. And on the relative level, however, gender still plays such a salient role influencing everyone's life chances and the experiences, because all the experiences are lived experiences. So the nuns empowerment, to me, is not just by the nuns for the nuns. It is by men and women, lay people and monastics alike. And it is for the integrity of the dharma and the health of the sangha itself. And it is for the equality and compassion for all. As we mentioned, the equality and compassion has always been central to the principle and practice of Buddhism, even since it was born. So I think today's conversation and all of your work truly represent the theme of this parliament, which is opening our hearts to the world, compassion in action. Thank you all our distinguished teachers, and thank you all for joining us.